one other team that is the big winners of the match day, and we wanted to touch on this because this is just a remarkable result. Eintracht Frankfurt 7, Bochum 2. Um, Hugo Ekitike and Marmoush, they must be the hottest attacking duo in European football at the moment, Stefan. I mean, it's just impressive how good these two guys are playing together.
It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. They've both been outstanding. We obviously knew that Hugo Ekitike had it in him because of, what he showed as a young player before he moved to PSG. Marmoush is a bit of a different story because he's obviously kind of bounced around the Bundesliga for a few years. Not to really blow my own trumpet here, but I did write an article 2 months ago for Gegenpressing, kind of talking about Marmoush after he had a tremendous start to the season, looking at why he was doing so well. And I think there are kind of a number of factors that we probably have to bear in mind. I mean, for a start, we have to bear in mind that both him and Hugo Ekitike came into a team that were already quite well built to work around two fast, direct forwards in Jesper Lindstrom and Randall Kolomoani. Both of them were happy to play drift out wide, run into balls over the top, counter-attack with speed, link up with midfielders, and you could really see how Ekitike and Marmoush have kind of really stepped into both those roles, and Frankfurt have said, that's great, we'll just kind of keep doing what we've done before. And yeah, it's worked tremendously well. But Marmoush in particular has been a really interesting one because obviously, 2 or 3 seasons ago, he was on loan at Stuttgart, didn't quite work out. Then back at Wolfsburg where they let him go, and Frankfurt have picked him up and just kind of turned him into this remarkable player. And if you kind of look through his kind of journey as a player over the last kind of couple of years, Stuttgart played him as a winger. I actually, for my article, I actually logged the percentage of his shots that were taken outside the box per game in the Bundesliga. So in the 21-22 season, when he was at Stuttgart, he was playing predominantly as a winger, and about 45% of his shots were taken outside the box. He then returns to Wolfsburg, he's played sporadically. It's about 30% of his shots outside the box. He then moves to Frankfurt, gets played through the middle, similarly about 30% of his shots. But this time around, that number has dropped to about 15% because he has very much been used as a penalty box striker. And as we saw against Bochum today, he's really capable of anything. Right foot, left foot, corner, header, dribbling through the middle, players playing off him. It feels like a really lazy comparison, but the links to Mohamed Salah seem so evident to me. He's a player with remarkable pace, remarkable close control, an incredible eye for goal, and so comfortable playing off other players. He's also relatively selfish, which is also a kind of really understated attribute that Mohamed Salah's had at Liverpool as well, I think. And actually, what I found quite notable before we came on, I did double check the stats, which were updated. And what's really remarkable is if you look at which players have the highest XG in the division, Marmoush is third only to Boniface and Harry Kane. If you actually look at the expected assists, so, similar thing as an expected goals, but how many assists a player should have, Marmoush is top of the league. So we're talking about a player here who's got 10 goals, but he's also got 6 assists, which is just incredible. And again, that's very similar to Mohamed Salah, who kind of scores and creates goals in equal chances. So obviously, scoring goals for fun against a Bochum team with no head coach who are bottom of the league, who are just at the absolute bottom rung of just about every metric this season, and a team who look like they're heading to the Zweite Bundesliga as quickly as they can. Racking up goals against teams like that aren't exactly going to earn Marmoush or whoever else a move to another club, but the fact that they continue to do it time and time again this season is really catapulting Frankfurt into a remarkable position in the league table. And, as we kind of talked about, Leverkusen dropping the ball, Stuttgart have been very inconsistent this season. Leipzig continue to do what Leipzig do, which is initially excite and offer some sort of hope to their fans of being a potential title challenger, only to maybe drop off and disappoint. But Frankfurt are here, who've already gone toe-to-toe with Bayern Munich, and obviously picked up that 3-3 draw not that long ago, and continue to score goals for fun. But weirdly enough, the one team that have beaten them, which still baffles me, is actually Dortmund.
Yeah, typical. No, that's actually kind of typical because like Dortmund, we've already established that that's the sort of game that they win. I think the one big one that they lost was to Stuttgart, right? I mean, unfortunately for Dortmund, the structure that Stuttgart have is just a bit too much. But yeah, it is so very fascinating with this Frankfurt side because it's you look at this game in particular, and Marmoush is the big story. And I watched the Liverpool game today, right? And Mo Salah scored an incredible goal against Brighton, and I was thinking the same thing, like how lucky are Egypt that they have this guy emerging while he's still like an incredible player, right? But you can see the writing on the wall, right? Sooner or later, unfortunately, we need to appreciate Mo Salah while we still can, because I don't think we're gonna have him that much longer. But here's Mamouche, like essentially stepping into his shoes, and it is interesting how similar they are, and it's also interesting that Mohamed Salah had initially emerged with Basel, right? Then he moved to Chelsea, that didn't work out. Then he went to Roma, where he had that like big step in his career. And I think he was also like 24, 25 when he went to Liverpool. So like the
Mm,
same kind of age that
yeah.
Mamouche is now in, which kind of shows you, I think, complete players need a little bit longer to become complete players because like their tool set is just bigger, right? And
Mm,
I mean, another player who also didn't really fully emerge as a fully complete striker was Miroslav Klose. He was in his mid-20s. The upside then, of course, is Klose played until what? Till he was 38. I think he won the World Cup as a 37-year-old, right? So, that is the upside, of course, that if you get started a little bit later in your career, you also have a little bit more lifespan in your body to play on a higher level. And I mean, you see that with Salah, who is still an excellent player. And I think that is really the really fascinating thing about Mamouche is that he's really just coming to this complete level of a player this season. But as I watched this game, what really struck me here about this result is like, yeah, well, Mamouche scores, right? He gets his one goal, but Ekitike scores twice, but Ansgar Knauf scores, Mahmoud Dahoud scores, Can Uzun scores, Nathaniel Brown scores. It wasn't just Mamouche. There's a lot of really dangerous players in this team. Like Hugo Ekitike is the obvious one. We talked about him plenty. But I think that is what's so exciting about this Frankfurt team is that they have lots of different weapons to hurt you. I mean, Can Uzun, he is this emerging player. They brought him in from Nuremberg, right? Same as Nathaniel Brown, really young, exciting Turkish national team player who lit the second Bundesliga on fire as an attacking midfielder last year, right? So you already know that it's going to be maybe in another few months, and Chano Zun is going to be this fully fledged Bundesliga player in his own right. And like I think that's what makes this Frankfurt side so exciting is that they have so many different weapons to hurt you, on top of having maybe one of the most complete strikers in the Bundesliga at the moment.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, Hugo Larsson in particular stands out to me as one who is also having, not obviously as a remarkable season as Hugo Ekitike or Omar Marmoush, but is definitely going to step it up a level, I think, as well. And you're absolutely right. Karazun, Knauf, all these kind of guys are really impressive. They also got Matanovic, who's a young player who
Yeah.
hasn't really even got a chance to hasn't even got a chance to get going yet. So it's a team packed full of impressive young players. And this is what Frankfurt do. They develop incredible young players. They do very well in Frankfurt. And more often than not, they don't travel that well. But by that
Yeah.
point, Frankfurt have already whistled their way to the bank and deposited a check for, 50, 60 million euros. So they don't care. But, it just goes to show that as a club, they're very, very, very good at creating these situations where young players obviously feel very comfortable. Just to bring it back to Marmoush for a moment, just because it popped into my head when you're talking about Mohamed Salah there. Another comparison is that Salah also started off as a winger, and he didn't make it at Chelsea because they thought he was an out-and-out winger, and it didn't quite work out for him. And he then developed into this kind of inside forward slash straightforward goal scorer for Liverpool. And even though he plays off the right, he's more or less their talisman. And that's more or less what Marmoush has done for Frankfurt this season. Yes, he can play out wide. Yes, he drifts out wide, much like Hugo Ekitike, but very much a player who gets into the box, creates chances in the box, and scores goals in the box. So the parallels there are just too enticing to
Yeah.
ignore, it would seem. And yeah, it would seem that Frankfurt are on to an absolute winner there, because I'm not quite sure when his contract expires, but I'd be imagining that Frankfurt will already be, hurrying at the thought of interest in him in January or in the summer months, because you only have to watch him for 10 minutes to be like, wow, this guy is like the reincarnation of Mohamed Salah.
He's under contract until 2027.
Yeah, well, there we go then.
And no exit clause. So, I mean,
and how much did he cost it by? Zero?
Zero. Same as Kolo Muani, who they also got on a free, right?
No, they paid 18 million, I think, for.
Did they? Oh yeah, you might be right.
Sorry, Kolo Muani. I thought you said Hugo Ekitike. My apologies.
Hugo Ekitike they paid money for. Yes, I think Kolo Muani was a free transfer, if I remember correctly, and then they sold him for 95 million. So if they sold Kolo Muani for 95 million, they might get 100 million euros for Omar Marmoush. Especially if like a team like Liverpool discovers that he could be the next Mo Salah. How much is Omar Marmoush worth at that moment, right? Like,
I mean. Yeah, look, I still think Kolo Muani's a great player. It's not. I don't blame any young player or striker who goes to PSG and things don't work out for him, because, as we've seen time after time after time again, that club just chews up players at a remarkable rate, and then they obviously move on and do well, as we're seeing with Hugo Ekitike. So it wouldn't surprise me if Frankfurt sell Marmoush for like 60, 70, 80 million euros, and then they pick up Kolo Muani for 20, and then they just start the whole thing all over again. That it pays to be very smart and very proactive in the transfer market, but it only works if you have the sporting situation set up to. It's almost like running like an old kind of a car dealership, where you buy like old cars that have been rusting in the garage of someone's house for 20 years, you fix them up, you give them a new shine, you give them a new paint job, and then you sell them on for, however much, or, I know people also do that with houses as well. Like, people buy big chalets in France and fix them up and then sell them for like 2 or 3 million euros after picking them up for 50,000 euros at an auction or something. Maybe, I don't know if that's a compliment to the Frankfurt players or not, to compare them to old chalets in France, but but the only way that works is if you have to have the skills to turn these players back into the players they were before, or develop them into new players that we're seeing with Marmoush. But like Salah, he strikes me as a player who was just waiting for a club or a coach to realise what he's good at. He's quick, yes, he can beat a man, but that doesn't mean he's specifically a winger. And Frankfurt are seemingly the first club in his career who said, what if we play this guy in the middle? What if we get him in the box? And we're seeing what happens now that he's doing that.
Well, and the comparison that fits here is Frankfurt is a banking city, right? And they have people at the club that work in the banking industry. I think that is actually part of the re-emergence of the club, to be honest with you, that there's people working within the club that know finance really well, and then they know they are a club in the Bundesliga that is making now a lot of money because they get the NFL Europe games, right? And because of they don't own the stadium, but they have a leasehold of the stadium. So it's a 99-year-old long lease. So whatever like the stadium makes, the club earns. So if the NFL comes to town, they get the 10 million. That's 10 million euros a year per game, which is an enormous amount of money, right? And so that is the sort of deal that bankers set up. And they are also very good at like finding these assets, these gems, and just seeing them grow on the stock market and then selling them off at their highest peak, right? And I think that speaks well for what is going on at the club in general. I think there's a lot of very good work that is being done there in general. You just look at the training facilities, the stuff that they're building in and around the stadium. And I think that all kind of works in it. I think players also like being there. The city itself is, downtown Frankfurt is not for everyone, but the surrounding area it is a very nice place to live, and I think players like to be there and they like playing there. It's an incredible, in my opinion, the stadium in the Bundesliga with the best atmosphere, and so I think they've been sitting on this, and I mean we've been on this for years now that Frankfurt is a sleeping giant as a club, but unfortunately because of the way economics work, you can't catch up quickly, right? We don't have investors in German football. They can't just go and here's €1 billion, now become the next Bayern Munich. And unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. You have to do it slowly. You have to work your way up. And I kind of just feel that Frankfurt every year are getting a little closer. Like even last year when they didn't play the best season domestically, they still finished in like the top 7. So I still feel like every year they're getting a little bit closer, and they're doing it the right way, in the organic way. So yeah, and Marmoush is just a part of that story, I feel.
Yeah, I mean, the question is whether they are genuine title challengers this season because
Mm,
they are now third. They're ahead of Leverkusen and Dortmund. They're just behind Leipzig. They play Stuttgart next away, which would be a really
mm,
interesting game. They have Leipzig before the end of the break. Um, if they beat both of those teams and they continue to pick up points elsewhere, then, you never know what could happen. And interestingly enough, unlike, um, you know, the 4 or 5 teams around them, they're not playing in the Champions League. And it's a
hmm
Champions League which, as far as I've been able to tell so far this season, is taking a real toll on these clubs far more, not just Bundesliga, but everywhere. The
Yep.
teams in the Champions League seem to be far more tired, as far as I can tell, than they did under these kind of traditional group stage or the previous group stage format. So I know they're in the Europa League, and that still has a lot of game time. It's a lot of traveling,
hmm
and they might go far in that, so you never know. But them not being in the Champions League might mean that they have some sort of advantage over the other teams in that kind of race for the top 4 or top 6. And they've already played Bayern Munich at home, drew 3-3.
hmm
I know they've lost to Dortmund. I know they've lost to Leverkusen. So there are kind of shortcomings there that they have to make up. But with Marmoush and Ekitike up front, it just seems like they're capable of beating anyone right now. So it'll be interesting to see how far they can go this season.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And remember too, yeah, Bayern Munich seem to be cruising right now. But unfortunately for Bayern Munich, they have to start winning games in the Champions League because they've only won one out of three, right? And so the moment they will focus a little bit more on the Champions League, that is maybe a chance for the rest of the Bundesliga to catch up a little bit to them too, because sooner or later, like Bayern's squad isn't that deep in comparison to some of the other European elite clubs. So it's going to be interesting
Mhm.
to see when at some point soon Bayern Munich will have to focus on the Champions League, because right now they're not automatically going into that. Right now it looks like a playoff spot for them, not like an automatic round of 16. I think it is, right. So I'm pretty sure they want to avoid that. So that I think is going to add to the narrative sooner rather than later. And well, we're going to be here to find out how that's going to play out. Stefan, it's been a pleasure.